Pranayamam Pratyaharam Nitya Viveka Vicharam. Pranayamam, regulation of the life's activities, was interpreted as Karma Yoga because it involves the physical body. Pratyaharam, withdrawal from the sensual activity, is referred to bhakti because the senses don't run towards the sense objects without the participation of the mind. Since the mind has to be withdrawn from the world, today all your mental capital is on the world. Bhakti is to reinvest your mental capital from the world onto the self. So you redirect your emotions from self-love to the absolute self. The self-love is the small s, the absolute truth is the capital S. So to redirect your emotions to the higher is bhakti. This was covered. And then the third point, the verse mentions Nitya Viveka Vicharam. The focus on the distinction, reflects on the distinction between the permanent and the impermanent. Nitya is permanent, Nitya is impermanent. Now, when we concluded last week, I remember we gave you all a question. The question to ponder was, Rajima?
How do you measure the capacity to distinguish between the eternal and ephemeral?
All right. So how do you distinguish? How do you go about this separation? Obviously, it depends on something. It is not a natural inborn quality. That you must understand. Nothing is inborn, it's all cultivated. So the question is, what is it that helps you distinguish between the eternal and the ephemeral? And this quality is known as Jnana Yoga. So it's not how much knowledge you have, how much information you gather or possess, but the real level of Jnanam is measured with this. You don't have to be well-read. You can actually be an ignorant person. You could be a man of few words. You could be illiterate and yet be a profound jnani. Astounding wisdom you can have because it's just defined by this particular quality. It just boils down to this. Everything else is embellishment. Everything else, no doubt, is there is a charm. See, I could talk and talk and talk. I can mesmerize the audience. But if I don't have this capacity, I'm chalk and cheese. I'm nothing. It's just empty vessels making a lot of noise. That's what I am. Maybe you may say it's melodious noise, but still it's just noise. It doesn't make any sense. So the real substance, the real quintessence of jnanam is this. All right. So I believe you would have given it a thought. So I would begin by asking Kamalji, any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, with my little knowledge and understanding what exactly you mean by measure, the measuring the capacity, I think the key thing would be in our daily life, how much attachment we have to the worldly things and how much vairagya we have developed. Because vairagya is the result of our viveka. Viveka is this quality of discriminating between the real and unreal, or permanent or transient. That's one way. That's one way of measuring it.
Yes, a very nice angle to it. Viveka, what follows Viveka is Vairagya. Viveka is this discrimination we're talking about. And when you have discriminate between the eternal and the ephemeral, the effect of that, Kamalji is rightly saying, you must have Vairagya to the impermanent. Am I right, Kamalji?
Yeah, and you know, just thinking impermanent, sometimes one feels very abstract. So I was just thinking maybe it's just the worldly things, what we experience through our senses, which are impermanent, and we get attached to those as we take them for granted as permanent. So that's something, that discrimination, if we can develop, that would be a good measure, how much we are attached to those things.
Correct. No, absolutely. You have been spot on. That could be very, very powerful means of measuring the effect of your capacity.
Right.
Right. Really appreciate.
That's why I was saying that I was not sure whether I'm thinking right as far as measurement, what you are thinking. So I was not sure, but that's what I said.
No. I intentionally phrased it that way so that you leave it open so that you can give it an interpretation, and gives various aspects to it. It brings various angles to it. So this is one very pertinent aspect which you connected Viveka and Vairagya. They both go hand in hand. And then you are detached to the world, and you have developed an attachment to the higher.
Yeah, and another like perspective, which is also, I think, given in chapter 2 of Gita, is our equanimity to rag and dvesha, which also leads to the same path of vairagya. So as we come across our worldly experiences where we feel ups and downs, and raga dvesha comes, and how we handle those in a neutral way, that would also help us to develop the vairagya. And again, Viveka will be.
I wouldn't bring that angle here, primarily because it almost brings it too diluted. It dilutes the whole pitch of nitya.
Right.
And this also is more of an abhyasa. That is It's also an abhyasa, but it's a different frequency. It's like a flight that is flying at its cruising altitude vis-a-vis at 5,000 feet.
Yeah,
They're
definitely I agree.
different pitching. It's pitched in differently.
Different aspects, you can say.
Different.
But definitely this aspect, I was thinking like when two things are like mixed together and we can discriminate between the two, which is Nitya and Anitya. So this goes with that.
Your thinking is right. Thinking is right, because the principle is, the bottom line is the same. You're right.
Yeah.
I'll comment. When I comment, I'll bring in this element. Yeah. Yes. Appreciate. Very good. Thank you, Ji.
Thank you.
JP Garu.
Hari Om.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. See, the clarity between the Nitya, Anitya, the experience and the total attachment towards God or towards worldly things, very well is being talked about Vyasa Maharshi and Sukha Maharshi. Vyasa Maharshi is the guru of all we talk about. Sukha Maharshi is his son, very young. He is almost, is a white beard, white everything, is a very, very, very old age. Both are walking on the side of the forest where the water body, where the people, young girls, they were bathing without any clothes. There, when Sukha Maharshi is the first, when he's walking, all they came with the naked and pranam. They are doing pranam to Sukha Maharshi. The next, Vyasa Maharshi is next, when he's come, everyone is touching their saris and coming there and doing a pranam. Then Vyasa Maharshi, he felt so guilt that, what this, my son is so young and he's walking with the naked. And these girls, they're coming and, pranam without any sari. When they see me, I am such an old man. How they come with the saris and covering their body. Then they say, we didn't see anything in the Sukha Maharshi, the feelings of that he is naked. You are covering your body and coming, you have some attachment to your body. And whereas your son doesn't have that, he is fully in Atman. He was completely in the full of, that is a stage between the, even though Vyasa is a guru of every we talk, but the attachment towards the body and his feelings that, about his body and others' body, and the difference shows so much. How you attach to worldly things, how you attach to the Supreme. That is the difference which people have knowledge, so much knowledge. Vyasa is so much knowledge, but still he has got some sort of feeling that, the body consciousness is there, where he doesn't have a body consciousness. He has, Sukha Maharshi has got fully consciousness of the Atman. That is the difference which we can find, even though young and the old, the others can see. That is the more important. They can see that, whether it is what extent their level. It will be appeared in the minds of the others.
Correct. Thank you. I've never heard the story, but I appreciate that, GPKG. No? But but I just also want, having heard you very intently, what I would also be mindful is to come to any judgment or conclusions of these great men based on these stories and parables. For the simple reason, Vyasa is considered as one of the 7 great sages and saints, the Saptarishi. If a man has a weakness for carnal pleasure, he will not be in the exclusive club of the 7 great rishis and saints. It's like in a material sense, if you're a multi-billionaire, you will not apply for a clerical job somewhere, would you? If you have, that means you have gone nuts, something gone, some psychologically or mentally, there is a misalignment. So you think you're a pauper and you're applying for a job. When someone enjoys the bliss of the Atma, the self, he will not fall for such worldly, physical, the grossest level of seeking pleasures, essential pleasures. You will not fall for that. So there is a great disparity, and such a disparity that there is a hidden message in it. Exactly in the same way, they say the great Valmiki fell for Menaka. There is this episode in the Shastras where it is said that the sage Valmiki fell for a damsel sent from the heavens. Indra had this enough damsels with him, and his job was to send these women to disturb tapas of these great munis. So it's now your turn, just go and keep doing the job. So he used to send, and it was a turn of Menaka to come and disturb the great Valmiki. And the story goes, Valmiki fell for the damsel, she disturbs his tapas and penance, and he got into a relationship with her and developed a samsara and bondage. Now, Valmiki ji also, the saint Valmiki is also one of the great Saptarishis. Now, it is very lightly held until you scrutinize what it is and what the message is. Very rare I've heard this interpretation, and it's worth mentioning because you have clarified it in a different context. Now, what it is all of us have developed detachment, vairagya, renounced. We're talking of that here. But one of the highest thing to sacrifice for a spiritual man is to renounce his spiritual reputation. So he allowed his spiritual reputation to be tarnished with the only objective of educating mankind, that if you're not careful, even at this level, you can fall for the senses. So don't ever poo-poo the senses. Don't ever hold your senses lightly. They are very, very, very powerful. So what Valmiki did, he disreputed his spiritual reputation, which perhaps no other guru would have ever done. So in fact, it is not question of Valmiki falling for Menaka. What Valmiki did is far greater sacrifice than all gurus put together. Now, how many of us would understand that aspect of the great saint? So I would be careful. I'm not saying the story is wrong. As I said, it's very highly philosophical story. What you told is very informative, but what we conclude is very important. GBKG, you are actually muted. Would you please unmute yourself, sir? No, we still can't hear you. Yes, now we can.
So when I'm talking, they are unmuted. I was not able to.
Yeah. Sorry, I think you were muted. Yeah. Now we can hear you. Yes.
See what exactly when Ishwar, when he was sitting, the meditation or whatever, the Parvati comes and closes his eyes. It doesn't mean that these are all Leela. What we are talking, the essence, the subject, not bringing down Ishwara doesn't know what is Parvati is coming behind and closing the eyes. These are all Leela to see, to teach us something which even I am not distorting or I am not bringing down the Lord Ishwara. He doesn't know how he become a God when he doesn't know that such things are to be taken, that essence of the message, not the distorting or Vyasa Maharshi, and it's not at all. But even to that level, people are going into such a senses partly, that level also is possible to indicate to the people. You cannot think that you already achieved a certain level. There, that sense of information is totally different. We cannot think of their having Ishvara doesn't have knowledge of what Parvati is behind and touching, and this is the only we call Leela to educate us, to make us to understand. To that extent should be taken, not bringing any levels of between two. That's what I'm clear. I'm very clear in that.
Right. There's a saying, no, great men think alike. So we both think alike, sir. So that makes me close to your level, sir. That's all I'll say. So there is no discord. I completely understand. I just want to clarify.
To bring it to that difference between the senses, what extent that part only we should take, not.
Yes. Thank you.
Individuals.
Thank you. Hari Om. And also, just a note, I know we all are very mindful and very conscious that we should try to keep to the context of the question. The question we spoke about is, how do you, GBKG gave a story of Vairagya, that's the context of it, but I hope you all have not forgotten the question. Setuji, what's the question and what are your comments? We want to be reminded of the question, sir, please.
Question is capacity to distinguish between eternal and ephemeral.
Yes.
Read by what?
Yes, sir.
According to me, eternal is everlasting and without beginning or end, and ephemeral is temporal, transient, fleeting, and all. So the capacity to distinguish is measured by intellect or wisdom. The spiritual quotient, and intellect is directly proportional to your spiritual quotient. It is intellectually strengthened by reflection or manana. So every day at Brahma Muhurtam. So this we have to the intensity of intellect or the strength of the intellect is the capacity.
Perfect. Right. Yes. I would give 80 marks there, because 20 marks I'll hold back. You will know why I've held back 20% marks. Sorry, you have actually muted yourself, Setuji.
Guruji, I'm happy that I got some marks.
Okay. So yes, I think you all can take a lead from what Setuji had pointed out. RPG, any? So concentrate on the 20%. If you want to pass, don't talk about 80%. You talk 80%, you are failed. Watch out. This is the
so
caution.
I only have to get 20%.
Yeah, 20% is 100% for you here.
That's third class in India, right?
No.
Class.
I'm saying 80% already given. Don't worry.
So the only thing I'll add, I went to many corners of the study. So, and I wrote the question down very much as Setuji said, what gives one the capacity to distinguish between the eternal and ephemeral? How do you measure that? So I went capacity for self-control, shraddha, sacrifice, renunciation, and came very similar to a very similar place that Setuji came. And in my reflection, I looked at Bhagavad Gita 29 through 39. It's a great section where, it talks about buddhi, driti, and sukham, right? And in the three gunas. And so the only thing I would add here is that I think there's an element of certainly the intellect that gives one the capacity, but it's this sattvic steadfastness that would be my addition. I don't know if that gets us to 20%.
Minus
But-
5%.
Well, minus 5%. Okay, great. So Setuji,
Vilima,
don't
you can
hold that
eat
against me.
You can eat a sweet today, you can celebrate because it's got -5, -10%. Huh?
So, but I came to the same conclusion as Setuji, that it's the intellectual practice, the capacity for that is the differentiator.
The intellect. Okay, yeah, right. I wanted, perhaps you could have qualified further on the intellect, that would really hit the bullseye, because steadfastness, these are all again embellishments. But the real drive force, which acts to facilitate the difference, because actually we are talking about discrimination here. When we talk of discrimination, what is it that discriminates? The role of discrimination is with the intellect.
Mhm.
There's no other faculty in a human that discriminates. So when you say, what is it, that capacity that discriminates, means you're talking of the intellectual aspect. But the moment we say the discrimination, not between black and white, between rich and poor, between electron and proton, not between good and bad, not between a Rakshasa and a god or a goddess. It's not all those kinds of differences. But when we're talking of difference or discrimination, we're talking of one discrimination, which is between the transcendental, which is the Brahman, which is eternal, as Setuji said, and the world, which is ephemeral, which is the samsara, the world. Now, what is it that distinguishes between these two? So there's only one pair that discriminates, or that needs to be discriminated. There's only one pair that needs to be discriminated. The job of the intellect is to discriminate. But what is that which discriminates between one pair? And this is where I said 20% marks. I hope you all are thinking along with me. Ramji?
Namaste, Guruji.
Yes, sir.
The only thing I can think of beyond intellect is wisdom, sir. Otherwise, there's no other way I can qualify intellect. So perhaps this distinction between eternal and ephemeral, to reach that level, you have to use your wisdom.
Sir, I need to use my wisdom to make right choices in life, isn't it?
Correct.
Am I seeking instant pleasure? Am I seeking real pleasure? Even to control my mind, control my senses, I need to use my intellect and wisdom. Am I right? So the same intellect, which is used to make the right choices, to have clarity of thought in every decision you make in your life, you need an intellect, isn't it not?
Yeah.
But the same intellect is also used to discriminate between the eternal and the ephemeral. So there is an infinite pairs of opposites I need to choose from on one side, and I have only one pair to choose on the other side. So if you were to put this in a balance, on one side is the entire world of choices between good and bad, right and wrong, black and white, rich and poor, all the choices between sattvic and tamasic. And on one side, we have only one pair. So one side, I'm putting the entire world, another side is the Brahman. So the 20% addition, which answers the question, completes the answer, is the quality, what that measures the capacity is your subtle intellect.
No.
And there is a very powerful difference between a gross intellect and a subtle intellect. So intellect job is to discriminate. So the moment we spoke about the capacity to discriminate between the real and unreal, that faculty is the realm of the intellect. The job is under the realm of the intellect. So that thought process, that approach to the answer is through the avenue of intellect. But the intellect can be consumed by merely engaging within the perimeter, within the limitations of the terrestrial world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can just use my intellect to how do I wisely invest my finances? Where do I invest? How much return am I getting? Constantly evaluating the stock market, investing. All the time your mind is mapping. Mind is constantly engaged in the stock market. Even that to make the right decision, and one wrong decision, you can lose your investment or you can make a fortune out of investments, is it?
Yeah.
Even to drive safely, am I to overtake or not? You need to have that moment decision, and one wrong decision can prove fatal. Other day, there was a video that came my way. Very sorry to repeat the title, but I have to say the title. The title was Idiots on the Road. And then it was a compilation of how reckless people are in their driving skills and how unmindful, how not conscious they are, and what catastrophe they create for themselves and those around them.
Yeah.
And it is, if you see that, for a moment you'll have fear. Am I safe on the road? I felt that, to be frank with you, because I may be driving safely, but there could be people with no brainers out there, and I could be in serious trouble because of their actions. So even to drive safely, in fact, one of the best definitions of safe driving is you look on for bad drivers. It's not a question of whether you drive safely. A good driver is one who looks on for bad drivers. So in every aspect, what I'm trying to say is in every aspect of your life, you engage your intellect. So the definition of gross intellect is when your intellect is engaged in the discrimination within the terrestrial realm, it is termed gross. When the intellect is engaged in the discrimination within the realm of the terrestrial world, it is termed gross. But the moment the very same intellect engages the discrimination between the terrestrial and the transcendental, only one pair. And the moment I say the intellect, the same intellect, please, there's no two intellects, one intellect, the same intellect, when it is engaged to distinguish between the terrestrial and transcendental. And in order to do that, what is it that is required? Gayatri Ma? The intellect, subtle intellect, as you rightly answered in the chat box, the subtle intellect with which you differentiate between the terrestrial and transcendental. But in order to do that, what is the subtle intellect does first?
Subtle intellect first it has to, first it looks for the world, this or the others, and then by manana in the early morning, we start segregating.
No. Before you segregate, what does a subtle intellect do? In fact, segregation is second step. I'm asking what's the first step the subtle intellect does?
First step of the subtle intellect is to log on to the higher self.
The first job of the subtle intellect is to conceive the transcendental. And that is the capacity you judge. First, so how much you can conceive the transcendental is determined by the strength of your subtle intellect. It's like how much weight you can carry, 5 kgs, 10 kgs, 30 kgs if you can lift, depends on the strength of your muscle, isn't it? Exactly the same way, the capacity to conceive the transcendental is determined by the strength of your subtle intellect. Can your intellect go beyond the boundaries of the terrestrial and conceive an entity called the truth, the reality, God? You may call it providence, you may call it what you may, but is there something beyond this? And it's only a human being that can conceive. No other creature can conceive anything beyond the world. And there's no guarantee even a human being has this capacity. It is not you're born with, it is something you got to cultivate. So you got to first, subtle intellect creates a pair. It's not that every human being has this subtle capacity. Many people don't even have the gross capacity. Even the intellect at the gross level is not there. But the same intellect, when it's engaged in the realm of the transcendental and terrestrial, it becomes subtle. So if you have 20% subtle intellect, you can conceive the transcendental to 20%. If you have 60% subtle intellect, the goal of the self is very, very vivid. The calling is strong. The drive is there. And the desire to get to the goal, which is known as mumukshatva, is very, very powerful. This is other dimension, Kamalji. When you have the subtle intellect, the intellect becomes very clear. It conceives the goal. It differentiates between the lower and the higher. And it develops a very powerful drive, a desire, an earnestness to get there. That desire to get to the self is known as mumukshatva, the desire for liberation. So how many of you feel the desire and the urge and the suffocation of not getting what you want? Just like you, don't you feel the suffocation when you don't get what the worldly objects or beings that you are seeking? If you are deprived of any desired object, what do you feel? Reddy Garu? When you are deprived of some worldly object or worldly desires, what is your feelings are?
Pranam Guruji, we totally get distressed, disappointed.
Distressed, disappointed.
Feeling so uncomfortable that we could not get the desires achieved.
And uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, do you feel the same thing when you don't get to the self? But this also is a desire, sir. It's actually like taking a fish out of water. You will feel suffocated.
But Guruji, I think somewhere, nowhere we understand, because it looks like this more like unknown world. In the known world, we could able to, with the intellect, what we have. The first time I coming across the grass, a difference between a grass and subtle intellect. And we are trying to distinguish and try to create that pains and pleasures. But when you're talking about a subtle, I don't think we could not able to feel the pain or the pleasure out of it. Absolutely an unknown.
Sir,
is it because of we are so ignorant, and or we are not even to the approach towards the direction?
Sir, other day you were coming from outstation. and you, on the highway, you choose to connect with the satsang.
Yes, Guruji.
Why you did that? Don't you find a certain joy? Why are you there at this hour? Has anybody compulsed you? You find there is a drive, an initiative to be a part of this satsang, this journey. Why? Because it gives you a certain satisfaction. It gives you a certain inspiration, isn't it?
Yes, yes, Guruji.
Not doing it, what does it do to you? Having tasted it, having understood it, having realized it, if you were to not do it for reasons not justifiable, not for reasons justifiable, you were justifiable not to be in the class because you were on road driving, but yet you chose. But if for reasons you can't justify and you're not there to do this sadhana, to be in this journey, would you feel comfortable, sir?
No.
That answers it. That is subtle intellect. That is the desire to seek the self. That is the desire to uplift yourself. That is the desire to spiritually transform yourself. I don't know whether you're seeking self-realization in this act, but I know for certain you certainly want to purify yourself. You want to become sattvic. You want to be evolved. You want to transform yourself. Now, how high you want to reach, that is your capacity to conceive.
Got that thing. So it is the direction at which we are able to move.
Correct.
Is the one which is giving a clarity.
Yes, it's a direction. So the subtle intellect is that which directs you towards the transcendental. And what is interesting is you may be an atheist and you may have a strong subtle intellect. How do I say that? You may be an atheist and you could have a strong subtle intellect. Don't go about concluding that way. I'm just giving a point of argument just to establish something. You can be an atheist and yet you could have a strong subtle intellect. Don't quote me out of context, please. Only in the context to establish a point, I'm making this conditional statement. Now, what does that mean? Reddy Garu, please think along. Harish ji, can you please clarify what does that statement mean? Can you repeat that statement? Firstly, you'll have to unmute yourself first, sir.
I'm sorry, Guruji, but I am not able to understand at all. I'm trying to grapple with it for quite some time. But to say anything would probably delay the process of others. So, because I really am not with the flow.
Where are you lost? We'll try to bring you along as much as possible to the subject matter so that we follow. If I can request you to be brief so that I understand your concern and we can perhaps re-present it.
No, what I'm grappling with is I can put down terms to say that this is intellect or this is because of X or Y. But how do I know that I have more or less of it? Or how do I know that I have more of it than somebody else? I mean, which is a question of measurement, which I'm not able to put down. Like I can say that I put this in a very simplistic way. I can say that I know that there is gravity. I can say that gravity is what brings objects down. Gravity is what gives a weight to objects. A mass, it's just not mass, but there is a force. I can say all these intellectual things, but how do I measure it? I am not justifying its existence. I am not justifying the reason. I'm not doubting the reason, but I'm saying, how do I measure it? In other words, it'll come down to, therefore, if I know how do I measure it, I know what to do to gain it. So am I in KG or am I not in school or am I in class 5?
See, to be very direct to the question you're asking, how do you measure this capacity of subtle intellect? I clarified it already when I mentioned to Gayatri Ma. I said, even before you start discriminating, you must first conceive the goal. And the job of the intellect is to conceive a goal. Remember that. What conceives a goal is the intellect, not the mind. Even when you want to serve your organization, you must be able to use your intellect to conceive the organization as a goal. It's the intellect that does that. Otherwise, the mind remains to be running behind its own impulses and likes and dislikes. So the relevance of the intellect conceiving the goal is important here. So when you conceive a worldly goal, it's the gross intellect. What conceives the goal of the self, the existence of a transcendental entity, is the subtle intellect. And the measuring tool is how strong is your desire to get there. So we all have a desire to eat. But that desire to eat, the intensity differs in all of us, isn't it? I could have a very strong desire to, let's say we both may like a particular dish or like a particular thing, but the desire for it is different. Let's say you and I both like to travel. Example, please. But your desire to travel and my desire to travel is very proportionate. Now, why are we in this platform? What brings us together is not desire to eat, is not desire to travel, is not desire for anything else, but it's the desire of the self, the truth. We are in a spiritual path, a spiritual journey. So the common binding factor amongst all of us is the truth, the Atman, the reality, the self. Now, when we are all in here on this common platform talking about, because the essence of the Shastras is the self. So when we talk of it, you're here because you have a desire for it. I am here because I have a desire for it. Retigaru is here is because he wants to seek the truth. Now the question is, you got to measure yourself. How strong is that desire? I can't say I have a desire for it, yet I'm not going towards it. Man, because the job of the goal or desire is to draw you towards the object of desire, is it not? If you have a desire for something, it will draw you towards the object of desire. Now, if the desire here is for self-realization or attainment of the self, you must be drawn to it. And what is it that draws you to it? It is the wanting to realize. And once you conceive, then you see the difference between the transcendental and terrestrial. So the conception of the self creates the pair of the self and the world, the eternal and ephemeral. And then you distinguish, this is unreal, that is real. I want to seek there, I want to get there. So it is for you to measure how strong is that draw, the force, the intent, the motivation, the drive. And then I will borrow the word from what Arpitji has said, then there is steadfastness to get there. That goal becomes the very purpose and purpose of life. You are there only to reach the goal of realization. You are, as Kamalji has said, you will have total vairagya towards, he didn't say in as many words, you will have vairagya towards Kanchana and Kamini. You are not interested in acquiring and possessing and enjoying the world. You are interested in reaching the goal of realization. Now this, I can't sit in judgment of you. How much are you running behind the worldly acquisitions and enjoyments, and how much are you seeking the self? It's for you to measure yourself, because you know what your desires are. You know where your mind is. Where is your mental capital? Is your mental capital invested in the worldly possessions and acquisitions, or in seeking the self? You know that. I don't want to waste my time in judging you or thinking where your thoughts are. It's for you to measure. But there's enough material to give you the line of thought so that you can come to a very clear understanding. This is the strength of my subtle intellect. In fact, if there's one thing I would want to measure in this platform, is how strong is your subtle intellect. Irrespective, I am not interested in anything else of yours now. I'm not interested in your physical health. I'm not interested in your material bank balance. I'm not interested in your emotional quotient. I'm not even interested in how much intellect you, how smartly you manipulate, or how smartly you take your decisions in worldly transactions. What interests me in this transaction is how sharp is your subtle intellect. And furthermore, how do you strengthen it? Is the very satsang which we are. Gayatri also mentioned the early morning reflection. Situji also mentioned that early morning reflection, and the satsang reinforces and strengthens the desire. It's like it is food for thought. The more you involve yourself in this environment, it reinforces the desire to get to the self. So there is a way to measure the desire. There is a way to feed the desire, and there's a way to measure what is your level of subtle intellect. And that is all I'm interested, sir, in you. The rest is all tamasha.
So if I understood right, Guruji, are you saying that therefore you analyze the actions that you take, and then you come to the choices that you made, and therefore you analyze the reasons for those choices or what those choices were, and that is what differentiates? So in your example of coming to the class, you analyze why you did or did not come, and then go further from there. Because what were the alternatives, and therefore you know which is the alternative you chose, and therefore you get to the reason of that alternative. That something was more important or something was. So the relative importance comes from the choices that you make.
Sir, with subtle intellect, there's only one choice. One choice. There's no choices here. The moment you're talking of choices and actions, it is gross intellect. But the direction you take, are you going towards the self? Are you developing an attachment to the self, or are you developing an attachment to the world? It is only one direction, either there or here. That's all. One choice, one direction. Everything else doesn't matter. I may choose to be in a company, I might choose to be in no company. Doesn't matter what I do. The famous words of, again, BHAJAGOVINDAM. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangharato va, sanghavihinaha, yasya brahmani ramate chetam, nandati nandati nandatyeva. Rajiva, which mantra is that? Gayatri, please share that for us, so you know what's that exact, which verse? It came much earlier in the text. Verse 19, perfect. So there you see the translation. One may revel in yoga, which is spiritual discipline, or in bhoga, sensual enjoyment, apparently. As G.B.K. Rao Garu said in the example earlier, it's only apparent, not that they are indulging. You may see them participating in sensual enjoyment, doesn't matter, bhoga. You may revel in company or without company. Sangharatova, sanghavihinaha. Doesn't matter where you are. What matters is he whose mind rests in Brahman. So the acid test to the subtle intellect is, where is your mind? Is your mind anchored in the self, or is your mind caught up in the multitude of worldly attractions and temptations? But if you have the vairagya to the world, you may participate, but your mind is on Brahman. You can't run away from the world. Let's be upright with it. You will have to contact the world. You will have to interact with the world. If I have to eat food. No, you can't eat food which will appeal to the palate. So take a spoon of chili and pour on your tongue. Is it what you would do? Does it what it means? Oh, I should not sit on a comfortable chair. So sit on a bed of thorns. Does that what it means? No, it doesn't mean. So you will have to contact the world. You will have to take the best of the world, but yet your mind and its thoughts are not confined to the world. Your thoughts are well anchored onto the self. Just like you measure every other desire, which varies in its intensity, you also must learn and know how to measure your desire to get to the self, which is known as mumukshatva, the desire for liberation. And it is that capacity which differentiates between the real and unreal. The real always is, the unreal never stands the test of time. Means it is not there at all periods of time. Something is unreal is not there at all periods of time, the past, present, future. You had acquired certain name and fame in your earlier years. That fame could have dwindled or it could have no more, is it not? When you were in your youth, in your teens, or in your life of an entrepreneur in your 30s and 40s and 50s, when you are producing, you are perhaps the talk of the town in the industry, in your field of circle. But today nobody remembers you. Possible, isn't it? Is that real? It's unreal. Other day somebody came to me, so touching. I don't want to mention her name. She said her son was in the acme of the sports industry in the country. He was the real big guy, was a game changer in the industry, in the sports industry, cricket industry in the country. And you know how big the cricket is in India. And he was the real game changer. And sadly, he's no more. And she came and told me, every time there was a match, people used to throng to their house just to get a pass. Everybody were interested in them because they knew they knock at the door, they would get something. And after that man is no more, young is no more, she says, nobody comes to even inquire how I am. Nobody. And this is just not long ago. She said, just a matter of 2-3 years, sir. Everybody has forgotten us. Not that I needed, we needed. But people used to wait in queue to just get a pass to these lounges, to get this access to these VIP passes, and who not would come to our doors. Now nobody's bothered. I felt very sad when she said that, but you have to understand the reality. Is it permanent? No. The name, power, position, wealth, is it permanent? No, it's not permanent. Is it worth investing in it? A man with a strong, subtle intellect understands the impermanence. He will not consume his life in investing, as I said, the mental capital in the unreal, which ceases to exist. The real never ceases to exist. It always exists. And that drive, you know, where is your desire? What consumes you 24 hours in a day? What consumes you? Is the desire for the self consumes your mind, or the worldly capital consumes your mind? This is the way you know how strong is your desire. Is your desire for the world strong, or the desire for the self strong? Put the entire objects and beings of the world on one side and desire for the self on one side. The desire for the self will outweigh all the desires for the world. Remember that. One desire for the self will easily outweigh all the desires and attachments of the world. Now I ask you, is your desire for the self stronger, or the desire for the world stronger? I'm not discriminating which part of the world. If your thoughts are confined to the world, your subtle intellect is weak and mild. If your desire for the self is profound, that's when your subtle intellect is strong. I rest my case, sir. Hari Om, Hariji. Yes, sir, Keshav Reddy Garu. Thanks for your patience. I know you wanted to say something, and then GBKG.
Pranam Swamiji.
Namaskar.
Guruji.
Namaskar, sir.
As far as an atheist is concerned, he may not believe in God, but he may have all the divine qualities. He may not go to the temple, or he may not believe in God, or what normal human beings or general society thinks who are the believers in God and who are not believers in God. But still, an atheist may have all the divine qualities, still he may not believe in God.
That's a very bold statement. I would give credit to that, but thanks for bringing us back to that question we left with. An atheist, what is that statement I made? That's when I went to Harishji to repeat that statement, but he said everything else but that statement he said.
An
Fair
atheist too could have a strong subtle intellect, is what you said, Guruji.
Thank you, Ma. So an atheist too could have a very strong subtle intellect. No, I completely go with you. I get what you are saying, Keshavji. So you could be a very ardent religious practitioner, and yet you may have very weak subtle intellect. I repeat, you can be a very ardent religious practitioner, yet have a weak subtle intellect. You may be an atheist and have a very strong subtle intellect. Beautifully said, sir. Beautifully said. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Hari Om. But my question was, what is it that makes an atheist prove that he has got a strong subtle intellect? GBKG, if you can just hold for a minute or two, I know you have been very patient. I'll come to you, but I just want to rest this case on this. What makes an atheist have a strong subtle intellect is because he conceives the self. The first element of the subtle intellect is whether the capacity to conceive. He posits, he conceives the self and he says it's not there. He rejects it. He conceives it and rejects it. But the fact that he's able to conceive gives him a subtle intellect. But again, it's only conditional, please. Don't take it in its entirety. The fact that this chap is able to conceive God, he analyzes it and dismisses it. I don't think there is God. But he has the capacity. It's far better than one who doesn't even have the capacity to conceive. He's just holding on to, again, I'm very sorry to use the word, the dead carcasses of religion. You're holding on to the dead carcasses of religion. What are the dead carcasses of religion? Mechanical rituals, superstitious beliefs, and blind faith. You think yourself to be very religious and very spiritual, but you're holding on to the dead carcasses. Very powerful word. I got this word the day I heard this phrase, it got stuck in my mind. But I'm very discreet and very careful where and when and how to use it, because I could be very misunderstood. You will easily brand me. This fellow is a very arrogant fellow. Huh? I got to be very careful. Non-essentials of religion, that's not really truly spiritual. As I've said, jnanam is measured with this one quality. Are your thoughts lofty enough that can it take you beyond the boundary and the presence of the worldly transactions? That alone and that alone and that alone determines how truly spiritual you are. The rest is all paraphernalia. The rest all is redundant. It only protects it. But this is that real seed. The soil only protects the seed. It nurtures it. But what's the point of a soil without the seed? Nothing will sprout. Okay. Yes, J.B. Garu.
Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev.
Hari Om, sir.
But the true knowledge only gives you nitya anitya. Once you understand the real unreal, then doesn't come on the way anything priority except only one, that is self. That is and that process, all the dharma, satya, all everything you don't you go with the right path without any disturbance. Those disturbances are not the disturbances at all. It goes to the only one direction. That is only Nitya. That is the Atman. That to realize everything, the time, everything. He sacrificed for anything, anywhere, at any circumstances, and goes only one direction. That is till that Muktiyar, Jivan Muktiyar, you call Moksha, whatever. Only one direction. That is it. Same like, even for earning money, people, they want to go waste their time for so many other things. But they want to earn money. He puts his all efforts to sacrifice other things to make money. The same, similar, he believes in money. We believe the satsang people who comes, that is ultimately to get that. But there also, how much the time you are, real time you are using for this purpose. Otherwise, you are making yourself long time to reach that.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Setuji.
Guruji, I just wanted to share this regarding atheist. I was in Budapest, Hungary for about 15 days and interacted with many. And Hungary has produced a lot of Nobel laureates, and most of them were atheists. And from childhood, they have been taught only to be truthful. They don't speak lies at all. They don't know even what is lie. So they are taught truth is God and be truthful. I just wanted to share.
No, just don't mute yourself. Now, being truthful, which is connected with what in a Vedanta context? In effect, I'm asking a question back to you, sir. When can you lead a life of truthfulness?
When you are sattvic.
Yes and no. What is that right word? When can you lead a life of truthfulness? Very pertinent observation. I appreciate the comment you gave, but my question is just to end. I'm only endorsing, I'm only philosophizing what your observation is. The question is, when can you be truthful? In every transaction, every walk of your life, when can you be truthful?
When you are with the self.
Anybody can help, Setuji? Anybody can answer this question? When can you lead a life of truthfulness? Hariji?
No, I won't be able to answer that question. I don't
Okay.
know.
All
But
right. If there's anything beyond this context, if I can just request you to hold on, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Don't mute yourself. Just hold on. Gayatri Ma, you wanted to comment something?
When you're on the path of righteousness,
Correct. When you're on the path of righteousness, you're on the right path.
you're on the truthful.
The right path, the truth. But the righteousness and truthfulness are the same thing, Ilya. Yenama. Ilya, correcta? Wronga?
Correct. It's same.
That's therefore the question is still there to be clarified. The question is, when does one lead a life of truthfulness?
There is a answer in the chat, Guruji, when you follow the consciousness.
Huh? Where is that?
Yes, so. In harmony with consciousness, Vijayaraghavan.
In fact, Vijayaraghavanji, you're the only one who has answered, sir. Everybody else is just here and there. Truthfulness is when you uphold your conscience, not consciousness, conscience. When you hear what the conscience, and the conscience is symbolic to the conch in a temple. When you go to a temple, especially North Indian temples, they blow the conch, isn't it? No, you hear the conch. There's not a noise. I'm making some noise, some irritating noise I'm making. But the conch is that symbolic of the conscience. So when you uphold the conscience, when you follow the conscience, you are leading a life of truthfulness. And how is conscience and subtle intellect connected? Hariji, can you answer this at least? What is the connection between conscience and subtle intellect?
You're asking me?
Yes, Hariji.
The conscience, the subtle intellect shows the path towards the transcendental world. Because the moment we are talking on subtle intellect, it is connected only with the transcendental. And the conscience, also the truth, though it may not show immediately the path to the transcendental, but it directs stage-wise. So it is directly connected with the conscience and subtle intellect.
Sir,
when you talk subtle intellect, it will be only in transcendental. It has nothing to do with the terrestrial world.
Correct. Absolutely right. In fact, conscience is an aspect of the subtle intellect. Remember this. Conscience belongs to subtle intellect. Out of subtle intellect comes the conscience. So if your subtle intellect is strong, your conscience is very clear. If a subtle intellect is weak, your conscience is clouded with your desires. Write down this statement and examine, please. When your subtle intellect is strong, your conscience is very clear. When your subtle intellect is weak, your conscience is clouded with desires.
It's in the terrestrial.
So, it's in the terrestrial, it's clouded with desires. You can't hear what the conscience is saying. You can't hear what the conscience is saying. It's clouded with worldly desires. Please examine this statement. Think over it. So Setuji, if someone lives a life of truthfulness, they are following the conscience, they are following the subtle intellect. I would not call them as atheists.
Yeah.
I would call them as actually truly spiritual people.
That's true. They are unknowingly, they are
spiritual. They may not be singing and chanting the name of the Lord, but they're actually far more spiritual than any one of us. So I just wanted to justify what you said is pure Vedanta. I just gave logical arguments to that. Okay. Wow. Many people are blessing me now. Right. Let's quickly, I think we have very little time. We will, GBKG, if I can request you to be as brief as you can, sir.
The truth is the self or the worldly things. There, once you settle intellect is clear, that is the truth. That is what, unless you are in this path and again going into the desires, and that confusion should not be. The truth means the real truth is the self, is only one thing, nothing else.
Correct.
That is it.
There's only Brahman, sir. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavihi, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivate Nagantam. There's only Brahman.
Yes.
And Brahman.
When you're eating, that is Brahman. When you are walking, that is. When you are talking word, everything, even saying, that is without that Brahman, you can't see, you can't hear, you can't taste, you can't. Everything is that feeling that should come in the practice, that sadhana. Then only that is the truth. Otherwise, we'll be diverting our path.
Correct. Very true. Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Namaskar. Keshav Reddy Garu.
Hari Om. So,
Yes,
Guruji,
sir.
a truthful man feels uncomfortable being untruthful. It is very unnatural to be untruthful. So he will always prefer to be truthful.
Correct. He feels very, it's like piercing a dagger into his own heart. They call those actions as self-suicidal. So one who is non-truthful is like committing spiritual suicide. So they will never ever commit that cardinal sin of confronting their conscience.
Yes.
They are always uphold. You will never go against your conscience. So it's very, very most uncomfortable thing is to commit a sin.
Yes.
Thank you, Ji. Right. Yes, Kamal Ji. I know you had actually posted a question earlier. Unless, is it regarding that, sir?
No. I just commenting on the truth.
Yes.
You have already said a lot of things which I was going to say, but anyway, I wanted to highlight two things. One was truth is actually what I have learned from the Shastras is basically harmony of our mind and intellect. Intellect would be subtle intellect. And our Shastras do say, like even Bhagavad Gita chapter 16 says one of the, it lists 26 divine qualities, and one of the divine qualities is truth. Even Ashtavakra Gita lists truth as one of the 5 qualities. But one of the key things to highlight is we cannot gain the absolute truth unless we gain truth in our terrestrial or worldly life. If you think that you just gain the truth without gaining that truth, harmony of mind and intellect in terrestrial world, that won't happen.
Correct. This is the part, that is the goal.
Yeah.
Correct. Perfect. Thank you. Right, Ji. Yes, Hari Ji, anything there to further clarify? All good? Can't hear you, sir. No, we can't hear you.
I said, it is fine. I will contemplate a little more on my queries, and if I can't find an answer, I will come back to you.
Please do little contemplation for me also and share that wisdom with us.
Yeah.
Of late, I'm becoming very busy. I don't have time for contemplation. Okay, no? So let's not delegate our transformation to anybody.
No.
There's enough food for thought.
Yeah.
And
Let me do
we'll
it
come back.
myself and then I will get back to you.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.